Unleashed season is slowly drawing to a close, and as we brace for Vendetta spoilers, I wanna take a look at 140 tournaments played in this past month to let you know which legends see play, what they actually want to accomplish on the game table, and how close the format is to being solved. I'm Simon from Games Deconstructed, and let's get started! And as a starting point, here's the overall top 8 legend representation across all the events in our sample. 20.5% of top 8s go to Master Yi, Wuju Bladesman, 12% to Diana, and a slightly smaller 12% to Irelia. This is followed by a big drop until LeBlanc at 5.8%, Azir at 5%, Victor at 4.5%, and Vex at 4.2%. All 40 legends legal in the format appear somewhere in our top 8 sample this month, though for the less popular ones it is just once or twice. Now, something that I'd like to start doing in this series, starting from this episode onwards, is to give you a very brief overview of the game plans of the top 3 decks, so here goes. Starting from the top, Master Yi is a calm body deck, built to win combats using individual units that get +2 from his legend ability on defense. These units might be early game card draw sources like Lonely Poros or Scuttlecrabs, and in the later stages of the game, medium might, medium cost units with an upside like Ruin Runners, Yi Tempered, which the deck runs as a chosen champion, or, perhaps most importantly, since it's arguably the best unit in the deck, Rengar Trophy Hunter. It runs a suite of cheap spells that serve to either pump these units to win combats, like Discipline or Punch First, or to ensure that the opponent cannot play around that high might too easily, countering the opponent's tricks with Defy or forcing these combats with Charm. But the heart of the deck is undoubtedly Rengar Trophy Hunter. His ability to be played at reaction speed, even to battlefields where you don't have units, makes him a smaller but far more flexible Deadbloom Predator. And there's the absolutely demonic option of waiting until the opponent heads into an empty battlefield, then dropping the Rengar there as a defender, activating Yi's passive. That's an 8 might unit contending for the battlefield despite not being anywhere in sight moments ago, and should Rengar win that combat, you will get an immediate conquer point, and likely a hold point once the opponent passes turn. When facing a Yi deck, you can expect them to drop a Rengar on you at the most inopportune moment, give their defending units +2 passively, and hold a number of might bonus spells to answer your attempts at reconquering. Now, our number 2 most popular deck in the current format is Diana, which is a blue-purple spellslinger deck, with the best card selection in the game, accompanied by very decent card draw as well. The deck is comprised of a big number of cheap spells like Stupefy, stacked decks. There's bits in the deck to ensure that you get access to a lot of these spells. Diana, the chosen champion, can draw them from the top of your deck. A very similar effect to Raven's Bloom Conservatory, which is also a popular inclusion on Diana lists. And on the other side of the equation, to maximize the benefits you get out of those cheap spells, you run Raven's Bloom Students and Abandoned Hall that ensure that even the utility spells on the list translate into some might swings. At the same time, Fizz makes sure that you can reuse the best of these spells at a later point in the game. The deck's superstar unit is Hui Brooding Painter. Whenever he moves, you get to draw and discard a card. This alone allows for increased card selection, but Hui can also translate the type of the card that's discarded into either increased might for himself, to make breaking battlefields easier, or extra card draw. There's a third option, but it's a bit situational and it comes up more rarely. Tide Turners and Ride the Winds allow Hui some increased mobility to use that ability multiple times a turn when that's needed. You can expect a Diana deck to zoom around with Diana Lunari and later Hui, sculpting a perfect hand of spells and an equally perfect graveyard for Fizz to reuse later, and in the later stages of the game they will attempt to convert those tricks, lowering might, bouncing units, and moving Hui around until they win. Finally, Irelia is a Spirit-Forged classic that plays a bit lower to the ground now, but is still undoubtedly present in the current meta. The deck is green-purple, so there will be some commonalities with the first 2 decks on our list. But the point that the deck would like to get to is having a unit, ideally equipped with Boots of Swiftness and perhaps even a Guardian Angel, and using that unit to double conquer whenever it's safe to do so. That unit will very often be the Irelia Chosen Champion, who gets additional might if you as much as look in her direction, or Stellacorn Herder, who draws extra cards upon moving, which the inclusion of Ride the Winds and Irelia's Legend ability often allows for multiple times a turn. The rest of the deck is might bonuses, charms, defies and not so fasts to protect that crucial unit on the green side of things, and on the purple side, utility in stacked deck, and tricks like Star-Crossed or Ride the Wind to turn the tides should those might calculations not look favorable, because that Master Yi just played a double punch first or something. Irelia Fervent has a notable combo with the Battlefield Abandoned Hall. Since the might bonus from Hall also chooses a unit, Irelia gets an extra +1 on top from being chosen by it. This turns an On Guard played on an Irelia at Abandoned Hall into a +5. 2 from On Guard, provided she's isolated, which she will very often be, 1 from being chosen by the On Guard, 1 from the Abandoned Hall, and 1 from being chosen by the Abandoned Hall. Now back to the data. Compared to last month, we see the rich get richer, with Master Yi gaining another 7.5 percentage points to break that 20% representation barrier. This is no doubt bolstered by its continued success at regional qualifier level tournaments, and perhaps most visibly, Factor's victory with the deck in Hartford. Diana's hanging in there with +1 percentage point, and the biggest drop-off of the month is LeBlanc, avalanching down from 10% popularity to just under 6. Now, I'd like to bring to your attention that Irelia remains a strong candidate in those top 8s despite her lack of visibility in regional qualifier level tournament top 8s. This goes to show that these RQ level top cuts are such a limited slice of even the metagame at those very events, not to mention the entire thing globally, that the third and fourth most popular decks cannot show up in either Utrecht or Hartford. So if you hear any allegations of goat washing that stem from what's being played by those 8, maybe 16 players a month, take those with a grain of salt. Zooming in at top 4s and top 2s, there aren't any major reshuffles in the top part of the table, but interestingly, Sivir jumps up a couple of spots, the closer we get to tournament finals. It's not a huge percentage by any means, but it seems that the few Aurora enjoyers at these events were predestined to go pretty far when they showed up. An element that interests me greatly, especially due to chatter online, is how close to solved the format might be. Now, we would consider a format to be solved, or closer to solved at least, the more statements of fact we can make about it without starting a discussion. Statements like, Master Yi has a very favorable matchup into Irelia, or Aurora Sivir is substantially better than any mid-range build of the same legend. Now, the aspect that interested me enough to merit a separate analysis here is how close our most popular legends are to having an optimal build, optimal list figured out. Now, when a friend or a rando on Twitter tells you that playing Jules in Diana is kind of bait, they are gesturing towards a real or imagined optimal list of Diana, one that has the highest win rate in a vacuum. Obviously, there are parts of this that might be situational. You will build the deck a bit differently against the fragmented meta of an RQ compared to like a 6-person local skirmish where you know for a fact that 4 of them will be on Master Yi, but overall there are strides made in the life cycle of every format to agree on sort of canon lists of every legend and then popularize them. And that's what we will be looking at here today. But before we do, if you're enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel and following me on Twitter, @GamesDECON. There's a link in the description that you can follow. Thank you, and back to the video. The method I adopted for this is to look at decks like points in space. Decks that share more cards with one another are closer together, and ones that share less are further apart. Let's say we are analyzing 3 Master Yi lists. To make the example clearer, let's say they are pretty similar. The differences are that the first, Spanish Yi, plays 3 Fioras Peerless. The second, Italian Yi, plays 1 Fiora Peerless and 2 Alpha Strikes in the main. And the third, Polish Yi, plays 0 Fioras, 1 Alpha Strike, 1 Primal Strength, and 1 Tasty Feyfolk. All the other cards are the same. Now we can present those differences as distance in between these decks. One card that needs swapping for the decks to become identical is 1 unit of distance. So the distance between Spanish and Italian Yi is 2. If you swap 2 Fioras for 2 Alpha Strikes, they would become the same deck. Between Spanish and Polish, it's 3. You need to swap out all 3 Fioras. So we'll take the significantly more than 3 Yi decks in our sample and use the information about those differences to create a prototype deck. One that minimizes the sum of distances between itself and all the 170 Yi decks in the sample. In science terms, we're looking for a centroid, a position that's the shortest distance away from every point that makes up a shape. In our case, the shape created by all of our Master Yi decks. For the simplified example above, that could be a synthetic list running 2 Fioras, 1 Alpha Strike, 1 swap of distance away from Spanish, 1 from Italian, 2 from Polish, or it could be 1 Fiora, 1 Alpha, 1 Primal. That's also 4 total swaps, 2 to get to Spanish, 1 to Italian, 1 to Polish. And there's a third option that's the same number of swaps. If you can guess what it is, let me know in the comments. We'll find that synthetic deck and use it to see how many swaps away the average real Yi deck would be from it. If it's close, that will tell us that most Yi decks are kind of carbon copies of a general idea that we can figure out by just looking at the lot of them. If it's far, that's evidence of there being multiple schools of thought, sub-archetypes within the legend, or at least a lot of flex slots that get adjusted based on the local meta. So first of all, taking a look at Master Yi, this is the perfect Centroid deck for the legend. Bear in mind that this is not the best Yi deck, it's just what would happen if you looked at all 170 top 8 lists for the legend simultaneously, which would require your eyes to be at least as big as mine, and then you crossed your eyes until all those 170 lists kind of melded into one. That's what that one would look like. And this one is pretty close to what I would attempt to build if you asked me to recreate a Yi list from memory. It's the most popular set of 3 battlefields, it has 3 of Rengars, Scuttles, and Punch Firsts, and some of the more interesting stuff in there is 1 action, 2 Ruin Runners, 1 Tasty, and my biggest surprise, 1 Vilemo in the main. All these cards, maybe with the exception of the Vilemo, are in contention for being included in Yi builds, and the discussion is often about how many should you main deck versus sideboard. And this is the split that's smack dab in the middle of our 170. Now I calculated the average distance from this Yi Centroid for our 170 decks, and it's pretty much exactly 8 substitutions. So if you sit down in front of a Yi game 1, you should be able to guess 34 of their main deck cards plus battlefields based on the legend alone. A lot of the 8 that vary may be main deck side deck considerations. Perhaps that 1 action lives in the side deck until game 2, or these 2 Ruin Runners do. But overall, 8.01 is our distance from Centroid for Master Yi. Our second most popular deck, Diana, has its synthetic deck look like this. Also pretty close to what I would expect, just 2 substitutions away from the list Ibe Chiker used to win Riftbound Summer Open in Gdańsk recently. Comparing the synthetic list to the 108 Dianas in our top 8 sample, the average distance is 4.7 substitutions. So that's less than 5 cards that you can expect a typical Diana deck to diverge from what we've figured out here. Notably lower than was the case for Master Yi, which might be evidence of either Diana being more solved than Yi, or Diana having a more rigid main board sideboard division, where the Barons, for example, are never allowed to exist in the main. Let's go a bit quicker. Irelia, 99 decks in the sample, roughly 4.3 card swaps from the Centroid. Very consistent core to the deck. And for slightly less popular ones, Azir with 42 top 8 decks, 5.6 card swaps from the sample deck, and finally LeBlanc, 45 top 8 decks, 7.2 card swaps from the sample one. The culprit on this one is clearly visible here. The sample list plays 2 baited hooks and 1 seal, which is an awkward attempt of my system to marry together the hook and non-hook variants of LeBlanc. So the 7 card difference from what you see on screen is less evident of a single flexibly built deck with a lot of flex slots, but it is evidence of 2 different, somewhat overlapping decks that are individually pretty well figured out. At least that's my reading of it. And this is a data analysis problem that applies to LeBlanc Legend stats in any capacity, so if you're looking at her matchup matrix, for example, bear in mind that that's an average of 2 somewhat different decks that happen to share a legend. I'll leave it to you to judge if that degree of flexibility in how those legends are built on average is good or not. I would say from my perspective it's okay for this late in a set's lifespan, especially with the amount of legend variety we see contending for those top 8 spots. Let me know in the comments what's one existing legend you hope will be boosted to new levels of popularity come Vendetta. I've been Simon from Games Deconstructed, thanks a lot for watching, and a special thank you to the Patreon supporters over on patreon.com/gamesdeconstructed, especially Anna Schulz, Maciej Majka, and Piotr Michalak. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.